This is Bad Interpretations 4. It's the fourth in a series of videos that I've done on bad interpretations. So they don't deal with a particular prophecy or anything like that. They are kind of systemic overall problems in the interpretations. And the one we're going to discuss here is having the wrong paradigm or having the wrong model for understanding prophecy, or you could even talk about having the wrong worldview. All of these things are related and are saying the same thing. And having the wrong model gives you the wrong understanding of what prophecy is saying. So the wrong interpretation paradigm is what we're talking about. And so a paradigm is a way of thinking. It's kind of the way you associate things together in your mind and make sense of things. And so in this context for prophecy, a system or method of interpretation is what we're talking about. So it's a way of doing things. It's a system. It's a method. All of those things are good words to use. And I'm hoping that one of these will lock into you and help you to understand this kind of difficult idea. So another way of describing it is as a model that a person has in their head that he uses to understand prophecy. And so this model guides him in how to put the pieces together and make sense of all of the things that are said and what things are talking in what way. So this model is what guides him. And so and we all have these models, and we have models of all sorts of things in the world. And these models are in our head, and they help us to understand how the world works, and we use them in all parts of our lives to make sense of the world around us. And we all do that, although we don't consciously do that. But you can have the wrong model for something, and the same thing is true in the world. If you have the wrong model for how people are going to respond to something you say, that may get you in trouble. And so exactly that problem is what we're going to see here, is that if you have the wrong model for prophecy interpretation, it may sometimes work and sometimes give you the wrong answer, or it may just never give you the right answer. That's a really bad model would be like that. And we'll talk about one of those right away. There's a model for interpretation called the preterist model, and I'll cover this in a later video. I don't want to get into it here. Um, and this model is such a bad model that it gives the wrong answer all the time. But there's still a bunch of people who follow this model because it fits in with their preconceived notions about some things. And so we're not going to go into that at this time. The case here, though, is that I do want to talk about is a model that is real things are literal things. Okay, and I'll explain that. In this model, they look at prophecy, descriptions of things in prophecy that are in our reality should be interpreted as literal descriptions of literal things. Okay, so if Revelation might refer to a tree, for example, and so a tree is something that we have in our reality. We know what a tree is. It has bark and all sort of stuff, and it makes sense to us. So we say because this is something real in our reality, therefore Revelation is referring to a literal tree, not to a symbolic reference to something else. So we take, or people who adopt this model, and I'm not one of them, take it as if it's a tree and we know what a tree is, then it has to be talking about a literal tree. It's a tree is not a symbolic reference to something else. Okay, so taking the other way around, when Revelation refers to a 10-headed beast, there is no such thing in our reality. We don't have 10-headed beasts. One head is the most we ever get on anything. And so therefore we know, because it's not in our reality, we assume that Revelation is using this as a symbolic reference to something else. Okay? So what this is doing is this model is giving people a way to separate the symbolic references from the literal ones to help them understand prophecy and Revelation, especially because it's so heavily symbolic that way. But Daniel and others as well have the same sort of issues many times in picking out which are the symbolic references and which are the literal ones. And this model gives you a way of doing that. But the paradigm, the model is wrong. It is giving people wrong results, and I see that so often. Just recently, I saw another case of that where a pastor was talking about something in prophecy, and he misunderstood it because he has the wrong model. And so people who use this model claim that they use it throughout the Bible, not just for prophecy. And they say, we use this model globally throughout the Bible, and it serves us with all sorts of other things. But they really don't do that. And when it comes to parables, there's a problem with this model. And so, if you think of Jesus' parable about the sower and the seeds, I think every one of us knows that parable, and we know that the sower and the seeds have deeper meanings. They mean something other than literal sowers and seeds. But if you took this model and applied it to that, it would cause you to take literal meanings. You would say, well, it's really just about a man who is out sowing seeds, and some of the seeds grow and some don't grow, and that's all there is to it. And you would just take the literal meaning from it. You wouldn't pull out the spiritual meaning, which is really what Jesus wanted his people to do. So using this model on a parable gives you the wrong answer. It gives you the wrong result, and you miss the spiritual meaning, which is really the point of it. You've misunderstood the whole value of it. And so what these people do who adopt this model and use this model is they have to exempt parables from the model's rule. So they have to say, okay, this is a parable, so we aren't going to use the model on this parable because the model doesn't work on parables. And so the first thing you need to do if you're a reader of the Bible is you have to determine if the text is a parable. And so that'll tell you whether you can apply that model or not. And so the reader needs to do this first test first before he can apply the model. Bad situation. And so, therefore, they have to view prophecies as being different from parables. And that's where the really big problem comes in here. Prophecies are large parables. And that's what they are. Prophecies are symbolic writings, just as parables are. They use symbolism to describe certain things. And so, what they do in with this model is for example, when Jesus is talking, and it will say, and Jesus gave them this parable, and they say, oh, okay, it's a parable, so I can't apply the model here. We'll just go on from that. In fact, they use the model sometimes to pick out parables, but what they're doing is really losing the value of what's in the symbolic writings by treating prophecies differently than parables. When they are going through the Gospels and looking at Jesus' parables, they recognize a parable and they take it out. But what they should be doing with the prophecies is doing the same thing, really, and saying, oh, this is a prophecy and therefore it's a parable, and the model doesn't apply to anything in that prophecy. But they don't apply it that way. And so I'm going to use an example from Revelation here. And this is one that appears to be something you would take literally according to that model. So, and the third sounded, and a great burning star fell from the sky like a blaze, and it fell on a third of the rivers and upon the springs of water. And the name of the star is called Absinthium, and a third of the water became like absinthe, and a multitude of people died because the waters were made toxic. Okay, so in that model, a burning star would be a meteor, and it talks about it fell from the sky like a blaze. That sounds like a meteor. You'd say, okay, great, that's a meteor. And rivers, springs of water, we know what those are. Those are very part of our reality. And therefore, you would say, well, everything in here is part of our reality, and so everything here is literal. So we're talking about a literal meteor falling on literal rivers and literal springs of water. And that's what their model would do. That's completely wrong. There is no way that something can fall from the sky and pollute only 1/3 of the water of only rivers. So only 1/3 of the water gets polluted, and only rivers and streams. Why not lakes? Why not oceans? And so if you just use a little common sense to that, you can see that while those elements, the rivers and springs, might be a part of reality, the idea that it would be possible for something to fall from the sky and only pollute 1/3 of the water and only rivers and streams. And so it can't be taken literally. It isn't meant to be. And signs are there that you shouldn't take it literally. And generally, Revelation's like that. Even the things like trees are symbolic, and you shouldn't be interpreting them literally. So, summarizing all of what I've done here in this short time, the way you choose to interpret prophecy affects your results, and in a massive way. If you have the wrong model for interpreting prophecy, if you're misusing it in some way, if you have a bad translation you're working from, all those sort of things that help you to interpret prophecy, if you are doing those things wrong, you're going to get wrong results. Sometimes you get right results, but in certain cases, you're going to get wrong results if you have the wrong model. And Better yet, Revelation is best interpreted by looking for similar uses in the Old Testament of the things it describes. And so go back to the Old Testament, look for those rivers and springs there. How are they used? Revelation also talks about an eagle. How is it used? Look back at the Old Testament, it's there. And so a lot of these elements in Revelation that are reality items, birds, rivers, springs, those things are part of our reality. Um, but they are symbolic and they are used symbolic. And there are places in the Old Testament where they're also used symbolically in the same ways. And so you can use the Old Testament to help you understand Revelation. And that's a big key to understanding Revelation.